Hi, I'm Greg Corombos. My guest at this time is Adam Andrzejewski. He's the founder and CEO at openthebooks.com. We want to get his thoughts on the $3 trillion coronavirus response plan from House Democrats, which they say is essential and Republicans contend is a non-starter. So what is in the bill and what is the impact of doing it or not doing it? We'll also take a look at Adam's work that helps to inform this debate in a lot of different ways. And Adam, thanks so much for being with us.
Great to be on the program, Greg. Thank you very much for your interest in our work.
Absolutely. Well, a $3 trillion package. It wasn't that long ago, about 2 months ago, not even, that we got the $2 trillion package, which was by far the most expensive piece of legislation in American history. But now we're up to a $3 trillion plan. $1 trillion of it, roughly, is to provide financial rescue to states and some localities. And Mitch McConnell, the majority leader in the Senate, took a lot of heat not long ago for suggesting that states in dire financial straits ought to file for bankruptcy rather than get relief from taxpayers. You have recently written on the financial disaster specifically that Illinois faced well before this crisis ever showed up, and others have said similar things about states like New York and California, which are now asking for help from Washington. So what do you make of this effort from Democrats?
Well, the Nancy Pelosi bill at $3 trillion effectively doubles the first four coronavirus bailout bills, which totaled about $3 trillion. To put these numbers in perspective, Greg, I think we have to look back to 2008 on the Troubled Asset Relief Program, what was known as TARP. Then that was the bailout bill during the Great Recession. And the grand total of that bill was $700 billion. In 2010, during the Obama administration, they actually reduced the payout to about $500 billion. So now we've got $3 trillion already out the door, and Nancy Pelosi with an 1,800-page bill seeking to add another $3 trillion for a total of $6 trillion. So we are off the top into unprecedented territory.
No doubt about it. And there are other provisions in here. I want to get your analysis on this because Nancy Pelosi says it's targeted relief that helps a lot of people. Republicans say this is essentially, in addition to the help for the states, a major giveaway to rich people. And I assume they're talking mainly about Pelosi's efforts to raise the cap on state and local tax deductions for federal income tax returns. That was one of the things that some states like New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, and California were grousing about during the tax reform effort in 2017. Is that what's going on here? And what else is at work?
Well, I think so. And that, the states like California and Illinois and New York that have high property taxes, that effectively cap the amount that large, wealthy homeowners were able to deduct on their federal income tax returns. So the amount that they paid in federal income taxes went up. These are also the states that are asking for these big pension bailouts. So we took a look at Illinois, and we think Illinois may have already crossed the Rubicon. We found that there's 110,000 public employees or retirees in Illinois that every single year get a paycheck over $100,000 a year. In California, there's over 340,000 six-figure public employees. And in New York, there's 250,000 of those six-figure public employees. To put it in perspective, a well-run state like Florida has 55,000 six-figure public employees. So basically what Nancy Pelosi, the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, he had written a letter to Pelosi asking for $1 trillion bailout of the 50 states, and that's exactly what Pelosi's delivering. She's asking well-run states like Florida to put good money after bad fiscal policy in states like Illinois, New York, and California.
So you're saying the taxpayers essentially from the states that are well-managed are paying for the states that aren't well-managed.
And let's go into some examples of that. So like in the city of Chicago, they already had their warning. Their bonds are junk status. In fact, Greg, they're 2 notches below junk status. But in Chicago, you can be a tree trimmer. And at openthebooks.com, we show salaries of up to cash compensation of up to $107,000 for a tree trimmer. There is 193 city-employed truck drivers that make up to $140,000 a year. 193 of them earn 6 figures or more. In the Chicago Transit Authority, you can repair the escalators and make up to $203,000. You could be a telephone line worker for more than $300,000 a year in total compensation. So even the warnings and the junk bond status in the city of Chicago hasn't brought fiscal reforms to the city.
What about states that are well run but are still in dire straits right now because of the coronavirus crisis and the revenues aren't coming in with all the businesses being closed and so forth? Is there a better way to provide relief for them? Or if you open the books to one, you got to open the books to all of them?
So there's already money that have gone out to the states in the CARES Act. This was the $2.2 trillion bill that you referenced at the start of this interview. It was passed at the end of March, first week of April. And those dollars are still being distributed out to the states and the localities that were earmarked billions of dollars in that bill. I think right now, after $3 trillion of congressional action that's already out the door, President Trump has signed these coronavirus bailout bills, 4 of them. Let's wait and see how the $3 trillion works as we reopen this world-class economy.
We're talking with Adam Andrzejewski. He's the founder and CEO of openthebooks.com. And Adam, there's also money in this $3 trillion package for frontline workers. This is on top of a lot of money for hospitals that was in the CARES Act and possibly other legislation as well. And obviously, and especially right now, no one wants to stiff doctors and nurses, but you did some extensive research and discovered some truths about the financial resources that many hospitals have, but haven't been well allocated. What did you discover?
Well, just the top 20 nonprofit hospitals across the United States. These are the largest charitable hospitals. We found that they're holding endowments of up to $116 billion. So they have plenty of resources to navigate this crisis. We've posited the question, what's an endowment for, especially when it's over $100 billion collectively, if you don't spend it now? Like, this is the pandemic, this is the crisis, this is the purpose for an expenditure in tapping your endowment.
So what is the lesson here? Is it that the federal government doesn't need to be that active in this, or does it need to be more targeted in how it responds here? Because a lot of these states and institutions actually have the resources to help themselves, but just aren't managing it well.
And they do. They have the resources to help themselves. And here's an anecdotal example from the Cook County, Chicago. That's the county of Chicago, Illinois, the Cook County Jail. They're paying frontline nurses right now $90 an hour and $140 an hour when they work overtime. And they're working them 12-hour days. They're putting them up in hotels. They're working them 12 straight days, and they're also feeding them. So resources already exist to take care of our frontline healthcare workers. They're being compensated well for that care. But look, wealthy hospitals need to do more across the entire continuum. They're organized as charities with the mission to deliver affordable and accessible health care to the American people, and they need to be reminded of their charitable mission.
Adam, we talked about $2.2 trillion in the CARES Act. This would be $3 trillion, and the Republicans say this isn't going to happen, but I have to think that something is going to happen here in the coming weeks. Whether it's anything close to what the Democrats want is a whole other story, but if it's anywhere close, we're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 trillion in additional debt from these two bills, plus hundreds of billions elsewhere in the response, plus $1 trillion deficit that was already baked into the cake for this fiscal year. And the response from a lot of people, it seems, is just, we'll just print more. So what's the impact of all this spending, even if some of it is obviously vital?
Here is what's happened to date in real time. Republicans and Democrats have joined together to very rapidly pass a lot of bailout bills that are bailing institutions out that these bailouts have nothing to do directly with the virus. And I'll give you another example. We took a look at the top 25 most wealthy colleges and universities that have the largest endowments. Collectively, those 25 schools have an endowment of $350 billion. But in the CARES Act, when Congress very quickly allocated over $12 billion to America's colleges and universities to bail them out, those 25 schools were allocated $1 billion when they have $350 billion in their endowments. So what Congress could do to defend the American taxpayer, to make sure that the coronavirus aid really serves people who have real needs, right now, like the 33 million Americans that are unemployed, Congress should claw back aid that was doled out way too fast.
Is it the crisis that we're in, or are we seeing a realization that neither party has much interest in fiscal discipline? Because obviously when you get into a crisis, sometimes you just have to spend a lot of money. We saw it after 9/11. There was obviously the debate over TARP, which was pretty controversial. And now we're seeing it again. And so we got to the point this time where there was a huge debate over whether members should even have to be back in Washington to vote on a $2 trillion bill. So is it just a matter of the circumstances, or are both parties just kind of easing further and further away from fiscal discipline?
So the first four bills have passed unanimously. Nobody's voted against them. And in fact, in the House, lots of these things, and the largest of these bills have gone on voice votes. They haven't even showed up to cast a vote. So I think we're into an interesting time when Republicans and Democrats on Capitol Hill have embraced the liberal New York Times columnist, the economist Paul Krugman. In 2012, Krugman famously, from the editorial page of the New York Times, argued that the U.S. Treasury should just print $1 trillion platinum coin and spend that. That's where we're at. Congress is minting Krugman's $1 trillion coins and just throwing it at this virus. And many times the recipients of this are the entities that have the largest lobbying staffs.
Well, as mentioned, Adam, you and your colleagues have done a tremendous amount of work on this. I mentioned the research on Illinois and the states, as well as what a lot of the charitable hospitals are doing with their money or not doing with their money. And you can find all of that at openthebooks.com. Adam, thanks very much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Greg.
Adam Andrzejewski, founder and CEO at openthebooks.com. I'm Greg Corombos reporting for Radio America.